There's something about the mix and playing tuba,
I guess so.
right, Tom? It's like,
Perhaps.
yeah, you have to have the Mick last name to be good at tuba, I think.
Yeah. Hi, Tom. What's happening in Calgary? I just had a close relative visit Calgary and say that it's still percolating.
Well, we've had snow melt the last couple of days, so we're all thankful for that, and we might have a semi-nice Halloween for the kids. So, yeah, can't complain too much, I guess.
Yeah.
It is winter in Calgary after all.
Great. So, what's the schedule with the Calgary Philharmonic?
We're sort of making it up as we go. Right now, everything is online temporarily, hopefully, knock on wood. So our original plan was to go basically all virtual this fall, and then in January recommence the program that we had assembled for 2021. But as things have progressed, that's all had to change, and so for the time being, we're going to continue to put together virtual performances. So my first crack is next week. We go in and we're recording the BAME Brass Sextet. Oh. And that'll be broadcast sometime in November. I don't have the exact date.
Excellent.
But yeah, Soldier's Tale is this Saturday. You go to calgaryphil.com and you buy a ticket. Basically, you put in your email address and then they send you a code. And then on Saturday night, we air the concert at the same time we normally do the performances. And then you have, I think, 48 hours to use that code to watch the performance. So,
great.
Yeah.
Well, Jarrett, how did you first meet Tom?
Oh, Tom, that was a long time ago, right? I think it was in Ithaca, right? Or
I think we met at Western.
Oh, right. Yeah. That was true. Yeah, and then I played for you in Ithaca several years later, I think, right? Did some
that's correct.
in the basement. Yeah. So we've known each other a long time, and I feel like our friendship has grown a lot since you've just been a great mentor to me in a lot of ways, and I really appreciate your friendship.
Oh, thanks, Jarrett.
Yeah, of course. And I obviously have a lot of respect for your career and your just everything you do as a performer and as a person. So I'm wondering if you could maybe tell us about your beginnings as a tuba player. Who were your first inspirations? And yeah, where did you get started?
Well, I'm from Regina, Saskatchewan. And when I was growing up, when I was at the age that parents decide they need to keep their kids busy somehow, we got introduced to a wonderful community band program called the Regina Lions Band. And it, at its height, had over 500 kids signed up in 4 different levels of bands. And that involved concert band, jazz band, Dixieland band, marching band during the summer, and really was an alternative to doing something indoors in the winter that wasn't hockey. And so I started on trombone in grade 3. My brother had started the year before me in band, and I always and still do want to be my brother. And so I was eager to follow in his footsteps, and I started on trombone. And truth be told, I was a terrible trombone player. I was a tall kid, but I was not a good trombone player in any respect. And so in grade 6, that's when school band started, and sort of as a last ditch effort to keep music going, because I'd sort of hit a wall with playing trombone. I started tuba in grade 6 in school band and went down a band and added playing tuba in the concert band. And the teacher that worked with us was John Griffiths, who is one of the legendary Canadian tuba soloists and players and teachers. And I had no idea of that fact. It was just John, the guy that played the tuba, that taught us. And I was really lucky in that respect that he was my first teacher from the get-go to get me going. And it sort of just blossomed from there. I was much better tuba player instantly than a trombone player. And in a matter of a year, I'd caught up and passed the level I was playing at trombone, and they stuck me in the top band for the following fall. So here I was a kid in grade 7, and I was in the A band with all these grade 12s and grade 11s, and just trying to swim. But I was taking private lessons with John Griffiths and making a ton of progress without really realizing the level that he was slowly pushing me to. So that's really where I started, and it was by the end of high school that I sort of started to get an inkling of where I was at tuba wise, because this is before Facebook, before the internet, before iTunes, before all of this. So the things that I had to listen to besides my teacher on the tuba was Canadian brass, honestly. The very first band room I walked into, there was a picture of the Canadian brass and Chuck. And I should just say that if you would have told me then, or even 5 years ago or 10 years ago, that I'd be sitting here talking to Chuck about my tuba career, I would have told you were crazy. So thank you for having me here. It's really humbling to have this discussion. So yeah, Canadian brass was huge. Everyone was just in awe of them. When I was in the B band, the A band had gone to Music Fest Canada in Vancouver, and the featured group was Canadian brass, and they all came back, my brother included, with this tale of how amazing the concert was. And you'll never imagine what the tuba player did. They did this thing where he spun the tuba around while he was playing. And I heard this and I was like, oh my God, this is incredible. So I got my hands on every single Canadian brass record that I could. And that was a huge inspiration. I used to.
Oh, so you were the guy buying the records in Regina. We were looking for that person. That's great.
I was one of many that bought those CDs. And,
well, CBC was a big deal then too. CBC.
Absolutely.
Yeah. That was a real boy. Canada had it on the run. CBC. Every day there was a program like the Eclectic Circus on Saturdays, and the places where you'd actually hear a variety of music. It wasn't so streamlined to one thing.
That's right. Yeah, I used to listen to Disc Drive every day after school with Jürgen Goth, who would play Canadian brass, Traveling Light, Roger Bobo albums, Alan Trudell. This is what I was driving around listening to in my car when other kids were listening to, I don't know, Dave Matthews Band. That's what I had going. So I got to the end of high school and loved playing the tuba. I met the great Fritz Kenzig when I was in grade 11. We had gone to a youth orchestra symposium in Banff, and he had been very complimentary about my playing and sort of had motivated me to look to the United States for university. And so,
well, Tom, we had Fritz as our guest because Jarrett is a graduate of the University of Michigan, and you had the same experience. Not exactly the same time, though, I think, right?
No, yeah, I preceded Jarrett by a decade or so.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But yeah,
you're closer to my age then.
Well, not quite.
Not that close.
We have 3 distinct generations here, put it that way.
We do. Yeah, you're right. No, it's so interesting, Tom, that you're sort of broaching this topic of access to great instruction in Canada. And it's something that we've talked a lot about. And I think one of the things that benefited you early on is that you had this amazing, low-key tuba pedagogue soloist right in your backyard. And it's something that a lot of people don't have access to. Like, for example, when I was growing up, I was really grateful that, I was 4 hours away from Toronto, but I was also right on the border of Canada and the US. So I could just pop into the US and take lessons with, Fritz, with like Dennis Nolte, who plays in the Detroit Symphony, any number of great teachers and players. And I think one of the bad things about Canada is sometimes that you're kind of in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, it can very much. Yeah, it can very much feel like an island. Like you're even in this city like Calgary that's 1.5 million people. Something that I'm trying to get my students to understand is they're part of this global community that they don't really know exists. And once you sort of tune into that, you realize the amazing community of tuba players that are out there. Mm-hmm. When I was in grade 12, John Griffiths' solo career sort of took off. Roger Bobo was hosting this tuba conference in Italy, the Riva del Garda tuba conference. And John got invited to perform, and he was the only Canadian on the bill. And at that point, people really didn't know who John Griffiths was. Again, this is just when the internet was sort of taking shape and people were sharing things. And so John convinced my parents to let me tag along to Italy. And I sent the tape that I had used to audition for universities to Roger Bobo. And Roger graciously used that to say, I want you to come study at this master class I'm going to put on after the Tuba conference. And to make things more affordable, you can work at the Tuba conference for the week and we'll cover your room and board. So I was like, oh, this is Tuba heaven. And it really was. I mean, that conference, I got to turn pages for Rex Martin's recital, for Mel Culbertson's recital. I didn't do a great job because I was just in awe of the tuba playing, but the access to all these virtuosos was just incredible. And the time with Roger there really shaped a lot. Hearing him play live when he was still performing, I can still remember to this day. There's certain artists that I think you hear live and the impact of their sound you never forget. And that for me is Roger Bobo. The first time I heard him play live, his tuba sound hit me in the chest, unlike any other sound. And some people have described this, and I think unless you've experienced it, you don't really understand what he created when he played in person. And then after that was 2 weeks of study. And man, the tuba players that were at that masterclass, Roland Zentpali, Velvet Brown, Hari Lidzel, and this is, again, before any of those names were names. And I was just this 18-year-old kid hanging on for dear life and having the time of my life. And that tuba conference showed me this community that I just wanted to be a part of for the rest of my life. I saw the way that everyone interacted and how much fun it was and just this communal experience. And so that's when I really knew that whatever I needed to do to stay in the game, that's what I was going to do.
Sounds like you're very tuba pointed. One of the things that we're kind of comparing notes is that I think I've been either congratulated for or maligned for, I'm not sure which, but the fact that tuba to me was an instrument that made everything possible rather than everything was going to be tuba centric and I had to be a tuba player. Just by luck, I was a tuba player. By luck, because if I had not been a tuba player, I suppose I wouldn't have been in Canadian brass because I needed me as a tuba player. So at any rate, that's the way it just kind of worked out.
Yeah.
And I've noticed that at tuba conventions that it becomes so tuba heavy. And Jarrett, we've talked about this before. I encourage tuba players not to attend tuba conventions. Go to trumpet conventions and horn because they need tuba players. Tuba players don't need tuba players.
Yeah, it's actually a bit of a conundrum because I realized later in my career that to advance further than where I was, I needed to hear myself as a non-tuba player. And the fact is that as great as the tuba community is, no tuba player is ever going to hire another tuba player for a job.
Right.
So you really have to hear yourself like other musicians do,
right.
and learn that. So yeah, there was a time period where I hit a wall later on, especially in pursuing an orchestral career, that led me to study with non-tuba players. And I can talk about that a little bit if you'd like.
Well, sure. And when we think of some of the great, the old, really old greats like Bill Bell had a beautiful bass voice. He could have easily been a singer. And the same with Arnold Jacobs. He actually attended Curtis. He was a singer.
Right.
And that then it's just, okay, what is it that you're going to do to amplify the ideas in your head, musical ideas? It's a voice. So now it's tuba or this. And I know a lot of music programs, you start in 4th or 5th grade and all you know is that instrument. You're learning how to play an instrument, like becomes real technical and you're focused on something outside of you.
Yes.
Rather than, and this is where I think Europe always had a head start on us because you had family music, you were singing, you were very involved in music before you ever saw an instrument. So that just became an amplifier of the song in your head. So that's what was that moment, when did that change? How did that change for you?
Well, before I was gainfully employed, I was in all these competitions against brass players. So I had made the national round the Canadian Music Festival, and I was the representative from Saskatchewan, and the other competitors were trumpet and horn players at the year that I competed. And the comment I got from the judges across the board was that I needed to be more musical. And there was no technical comments. There wasn't anything that I did wrong necessarily, but there wasn't anything that they could put their finger on and say, okay, if you just improve this, you would have, come out on top. And so I sort of hit this wall about learning how to be more musical that became sort of a larger study that I was focused on improving once I started teaching university full time in the United States. And that's what led me to, well, first of all, this book, which I don't know if you guys have talked about this, The Sound in Motion by David McGill. Gene Picorni talks about this a lot, and rightfully so. It introduces a lot of the ideas of Marcel Tabuteau, who was the principal oboist in Philadelphia. And that had me search out more study with his teachings. And so actually for a while when I lived in North Carolina, I was going every second week to play for Joe Robinson, who was formerly the principal oboe in the New York Philharmonic from I think like 1978 to 2004 with Zubin Mehta. And his approach to listening to me play the tuba and his concepts were completely different than anyone that I had ever played for. And that really, really helped me get over a big hump of incorporating those skills that I had sort of begrudgingly studied in School of Music, ear training and all those things that I did and passed, but I didn't really put all that much effort into. And it wasn't until I made the connection of my ear and the inner song and was able to put that through the tuba that I felt like I started to really cross that line and play things that people would actually call musical. So
yeah, it's really interesting. You sort of talk about having to develop that like musical self. And for me, like for a long time, it was the opposite. Like I had the musical sort of like side. It was like, okay, I had a song to sing, but I really needed to develop the technical side. And like, I would feel like I was just like not able to quite articulate the song in my head because my fingers were just sort of like not there yet. And like my tuba playing was just not there yet. So I would say for the past, at least however long I've been trying to get an orchestra job, it's been a lot of trying to get my tuba playing up to where my musicality is. And I feel like for a lot of people, at least from what I'm gathering now, because I played a competition or I played for someone recently and they were like, yeah, you are a great technical tuba player, but like your musicality needs to come up. And I was like, what? Like that's the opposite of what I've been hearing. And I think as you go up and you're trying to raise these two levels, this musicality and this technique, it's kind of this game of like, constantly like raising your game, but trying to not have one of those sides higher than the other, because that can really come through in performance.
I should also say that I think maturity has a lot to do with it for me. Like when I was younger and studying, I was really impressed by the pyrotechnics of the virtuosity of players. And as I've gotten older, that has become less impressive.
So hollow. Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's a ceiling of what you can do. And so I have much more appreciation, I think, at this point in my career for simpler things that on the surface may not seem too difficult. But when you try and replicate that through an instrument like the tuba, you really realize the level of virtuosity that like my principal flutist or oboist are demonstrating. It's like, man, I just want to be able to do that. And I think tuba players might benefit greatly from listening and thinking like that, and realizing that when we play in auditions, a lot of the time that's what the committee's missing hearing. They're not hearing that sort of inspiration that they're used to hearing when they show up to work,
Yeah. And you're totally right. And I think like pedagogically, if you take a step back, the music that we're given when we're in high school or even undergrad as tuba players is not very challenging from the get-go. I'm talking about specifically in like wind ensemble or orchestra parts. So I don't think that like either technical side or musical side are quite being pushed so far to like allow for that growth musically. And really when that happens is when you expose yourself and when you start listening to great artists.
Yeah.
So the fact that, you're listening to, your principal flute, principal oboe, like making like beautiful lines, that's the type of learning I think that a lot of young tuba players need to do, instead of like, just trying to like learn the hardest piece or listen to the best tuba player. It's listen to Pavarotti, listen to like the great artists, and then try to emulate that level of art on our instrument, because there's our instrument definitely needs that. Let's say that.
Yeah. Well, it's with young tuba players especially. I've been teaching Zoom lessons and clinics for kids in Calgary here, and I started thinking how long it takes before a tuba player ever plays a melody. Like any kind of a melody. Most tuba kids, when they first learn how to play the horn, they might play something in unison in the first 10 pages of the beginner band book, but right after that they're going to Oompa Land, and after that, it's pretty rare that you get any semblance of a melody. So
we addressed that early on, because that was exactly what I was sensing when we did our books of quintets. We made sure that it sent the melodies around and that everybody had an equal part. So it was a masterpiece approach. So you're playing real music, not something created for a band book. Very often it's lightweight, not world earth shaking. So we went masterpiece approach, mostly Renaissance music, and then made sure everybody had an equal chance to get at really being an integral part of the chamber music experience. And you're absolutely right. I think very often it's easy for writers, and if they're, let's say some publishing company hires somebody to write a band book, and they write the book and they scratch out a few melodies, it's always easy to put it just the way it lays out: melody on top, offbeats in the middle, and the downbeats in the bottom. And it's really easy to do that, unfortunately. And there's been too much of that kind of problem. So this is where the fact that you had great teachers from day one is that they would have, I'm sure, already been introducing you to other things that took you way beyond that. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah. John Griffiths was huge into duets, and he just loved playing duets. And so we never did any kind of organized warm-up or routine. That was never part of studying with John. So the first sometimes half an hour, 40 minutes of a lesson would just be sight reading duets and doing something and then trading lines. Nice. And once John sort of felt like it was ready to move on to something, or he sort of had his fill of playing, we would go on to the next thing.
So tell us about the orchestra. Tell us about the Calgary Philharmonic. Like, where is it? Like, forget this particular period of time when you're all doing the internet performance, but performance in real live time. Calgary, like Canada, we consider Calgary a pretty important place. In North America, I think Montreal or Toronto, maybe Vancouver, that's about it.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Calgary's, it's it's just east of the Rocky Mountains in Alberta, north of Idaho. And
I understand the valve oil was very inexpensive, right? Oil?
Really? Well, some oil. The price keeps dropping. That's for sure. Yeah, it's definitely a city that's in transition from being a real oil-dependent heavy economy to learning how to rely on other resources. And that, of course, has its effect on the arts and how we do things. So it's, I think I'm really lucky to live in a Western Canadian city where I've always wanted to raise a family and come back to, and have a full-time orchestra job. And that in Western Canada means a really good mix of pops and classical concerts. So I think sometimes the string players wish we did substantially less pops, but honestly, that's what gets the butts in the seats, and that's what allows us.
Is it true you guys play in full dress, white tie, tails, and cowboy hats?
No, it's not true. The very traditional thing in Calgary is to be awarded one of these big white hats if you're a guest of the city. And so like Yo-Yo Ma performed with us a couple of years ago, and for his encore he wore his big white Stetson that they give to the luminaries. I have not acquired a white Stetson yet, but maybe I keep chipping away here.
You're both too young to remember, but Canadian Brass was part of the bid team that went to Germany for the Winter Olympics.
Oh wow.
And we did exactly that. We had full set of tails and cowboy hats, and we had a van. We'd drive all over town during the thing, and the idea was that you're looking for ways to heighten the excitement about a particular location in the bid. And we would be standing outside playing as all the people came into the Congress Hall to do their voting and so forth. We'd be playing, but that became, kind of the last, when finally the announcement was made, we went through the audience with our horns and tails, and you can imagine in a Olympic setting and coming from Calgary to be representing Calgary in the bid.
Oh, that's amazing.
Hats were important. So
yeah,
that was a real moment.
Calgary has been referenced to me as the Nebraska of Canada.
Ouch.
Oh God.
not a great moniker, I know. Yeah.
Dallas, Houston, Calgary. You always put those together.
Yeah.
Maybe like Denver, Colorado. I would put it in that category.
Yeah, I was surprised to hear that moniker, but
no, we can save Nebraska for Saskatchewan. I didn't.
There you go.
So there's amazing things going on out there. My brother-in-law is a songwriter and producer, and is doing a lot of work out there. A lot of music creativity is happening there. Dave Pierce, you might know Dave, is so there he is, located in Calgary, but his reputation, he's done many of the shows, the Radio City Music Hall Christmas show. He does that show. He produces that show, and he's produced the Olympics.
Wow.
And he's right there, right next to you. And now they have the new music museum.
Yes, yeah, the National Music Center is fantastic.
It is, but we got to twist their arm. The classical is a little light.
I agree 1,000%.
It's like the old record stores where you go in and you see like 40 rows of recordings, and you get to the very back row and you come in from the back and you see this little section of classical.
Yes.
Apparently Glenn Gould is represented, and one other artist I can't remember just now, but it's a very small representation of what's happening. It's right there in Calgary. So you guys have to put on your cowboy hats and go down there and start playing as patrons are coming in and get them organized.
I like it. Maybe we can have you guys back in town and do that too.
We're game. It needs to be done. It was so exciting when they started the idea of that center, the music center. And I think they're trying to encourage kids to come in and get their hands on instruments and do things like that.
Yep.
But right now it's mostly a pop museum, I would say.
Yep. Yeah. Absolutely.
So that's certainly someplace we could have an influence. And you guys, you got time on your hands in Calgary. You should get over there.
That's a good point.
Okay, we're insisting. So send us some video of you doing that.
Okay.
So encouraging you to get to work here. So who's the conductor, and where's the Philharmonic at this point?
The conductor is Rune Bergmann, who is a Norwegian composer. Conductor, not composer. And he typically does, I guess, about 10 programs a year. And one of the things that we're very lucky to have in Calgary is when he started, which actually was my first season. I actually played my trial week, was his first time conducting the orchestra. So I've seen him basically the entire time he's been in Calgary. He came in gung-ho to do live streaming and really had this vision of being able to share what we do in Calgary worldwide. And so over the past 5 seasons, we've been doing more and more live streaming, not without its hiccups and challenges. And there was a lot of questioning whether or not, if we have the cameras on, or are we still going to have people in the seats, and is this a good thing? And I think his time is shown us that we're very lucky to have that infrastructure when COVID started, that we could rely on that, and we have the crew that knows how to do it and knows how to record, so we can continue to be relevant and part of the landscape. So yeah, he's great. He's a trumpet player by training, and so he enjoys the brass, and he's actually
that says it all. Trumpet player. Let's move on. Yeah, let's move on.
but he's actually quite a good trumpet player. We were doing actually a brass quintet concert for a reception that he was at, and he walked over and he said, "Can I play a tune?" And we all sort of said, "Sure." And so he just grabbed the second trumpet player's horn, sat down, and chose the most ridiculously slow tempo for this transcription. And having not warmed up or played, he held on for dear life and sounded fantastic. Nice. So originally we had planned to do the Bame Sextet with him playing one of the other trumpet parts, but because of COVID, we're moving on with that. But yeah, he's wonderful.
I was going to say, because of COVID, I don't think anybody's going to be sharing instruments.
No, that's
Would not be.
definitely a thing of the past.
Oh, Jarrett, were we not supposed to do that last week?
I didn't play yours. You played mine.
I
So
did.
I was being good. You were not.
So, Tom, you had a health scare recently yourself.
I
So
did.
I think I'm in the high risk, supposedly a high risk because of age, because I'm over 40.
Sorry, I didn't mute myself.
And I think you're probably in a high risk as well. Corona, we have to be careful of who we talk to and so forth.
Yeah, actually, I'm no longer in the high risk category, and the reason why is that I guess I'm saying these days I'm a reluctantly proud cancer survivor, because it's not something that I wished that I had to have gone through, but it's part of the journey and part of my life, and it's not something that you can just glaze over. So I'm still coming to grips with how much and how to talk about it, because it's a real difficult journey, and it's a real difficult thing. But I can very happily say that I've passed the year mark a couple months ago of having a stem cell transplant, and it did exactly what it was supposed to do. So I have a normally functioning immune system with a brand new DNA. I don't know if you guys know that, but when you have a stem cell transplant, your body takes on the DNA of your donors. And so if I send in my DNA sample now to one of those registries that you see advertised on television, the results will be totally messed up, because they're not going to be able to tell who I am. But yeah, that takes me out of the risk category for COVID, because I'm no longer immunosuppressed in any kind of way. So I'm very lucky, and I'm very thankful, and I'm very, very grateful to be doing as well as I am. But yeah, had a rough go, and 2 fights with leukemia, and came out the other side, I think stronger for it, but it hasn't been easy. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I mean, just seeing you go through this twice was just really difficult. I mean, it was obviously very difficult for you, but it was difficult for me to see the toll that this took on you. And one thing that I've always admired about you is that you are very tenacious, and there was never a doubt in my mind that you were going to get through this, just because, I mean, that's the thing I'm the most inspired by you, and I think that comes into a lot of what you do, both in your tuba playing, and you're a great father and a great husband. And I think that one thing that was really clear to me during both of your bouts with cancer was that you were just determined to get through it. So I'm just wondering, I mean, is there anything that sort of kept you going on the darkest days? Because I know that's a tough thing for a lot of people, and a lot of people, I wouldn't say are going through cancer right now, but
Right.
A lot of people are going through difficult times. So if you have any pieces of advice for anybody who may be struggling out there,
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Well, I think time is a really funny thing. And I think that some days, you talk about dark days, some days can seem so long, and then you can look back and 6 months goes by in the blink of an eye. And I think when you have an intense and difficult experience like cancer, the days can be extremely long and excruciating. And so there comes a point where you have to sort of give up control over the process, and essentially put your trust that things are going to get better. And that trust comes from listening to your doctors and believing that they know so much more than you could ever comprehend about what you're going through, and trust that when they say that this treatment is going to be successful, and that this is totally normal, and this is what you're used to, what they're used to seeing people experience, that you have to believe them that the days are going to get better. If you try and control any of that, you're in for a nightmare situation. It doesn't matter how strong you want to be. It's still going to pass at the same time. So I think that the trust thing was really important for me, and I'm really lucky that I have this amazing support system with my wife, especially,
Nice.
who would reinforce that and was really, really patient with me on that. And I've got a lot to live for. I've got two amazing kids that I really, really wanted to be a dad for as long as I possibly could. And that was the thing that gave me the perspective to endure the worst of the worst. So,
it's remarkable for me to have watched. And as you know, we got our start at Hamilton, and when we were there, the Mac school developed an innovative program where they accepted people into the doctoral program that did not necessarily have the medical background. In other words, a musician could be four-year graduate. But needless to say, there's a lot of things they had to catch up on. But it seemed to me that was really the start of innovation that has permeated. One of the major builders of that, Marnie Pagan, was a major part of building this MAC program that took the idea that you could have people with a different personality. Somebody that an effervescent musician might make a good doctor, and right. That the research and the care. I mean, the fact that the survivor, just your story now, amazing what's developed here in Canada. That's even a possibility. I mean, that would not have been a story, back then.
Right.
And because of the innovation and interest. And it's curious to me that the same people that are interested in music and really supportive of a music program, and I mentioned Marnie, somebody that was really behind an orchestra and really behind music, was also really behind this kind of innovation. And you find that kind of crossover is really fantastic. And yeah. I think the fact what you're talking about really is a message to other people. If you're in this kind of situation, Ryan Anthony, as you know, was a member of our group, and was a very strong voice for people going through this process, and he unfortunately was hit much harder.
Yeah, Actually, Ryan and I became, I guess, internet pen pals is probably the best way to describe it. And I sought out his advice when I was returning to the tuba after my first bout with cancer, and he was so gracious with his time to write me and to provide a lot of perspective on challenges that he understood that I was going through that literally nobody else could. I mean, he's really a guardian angel, and I really don't think people realize the bravery that it takes to not only take on cancer and beat it multiple times like Ryan did, but to be so public with it, with your struggles. I mean, it's literally the most difficult thing that you got to put someone through, and for someone to take that battle and be able to put that out there and share it with the world is something that I just can't comprehend after going through it. I mean, I'm just in awe.
That's interesting. It's interesting. You just developed the parallel that just really rings strong. And Ryan was the great communicator. He could bring an audience to tears with his trumpet, but he also did it with the imaginative and interesting way that he could talk to patients. This idea of going out and really talking. He started having like almost groups around him that would come to him for that kind of advice and inspiration.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I met
a real parallel.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. After his passing, I ended up meeting via Facebook another person who was helped by Ryan in similar regard, who had been facing their own cancer battle, and Ryan provided the same thing, and it's just really it's remarkable. It's a club.
Sweet.
Yeah,
very sweet. Yeah. Well, that's really fun. So both of you guys have the Ann Arbor experience. Did you actually attend the University of Michigan or just studied with Fritz?
No, I did. I actually started my undergrad there. I ended up transferring to McGill where I graduated.
Mm-hmm.
But I did start at University of Michigan.
Who was that? Who was at McGill at the time? Miller?
Yeah, Dennis Miller.
Yeah.
Yeah. But when I was at the University of Michigan, my now wife and I went on a couple dates. And after our second date was a Canadian brass concert. And after that concert, we snapped this picture.
Oh, look at that.
So that's 23 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's great. So we didn't interrupt your relationship. That's it.
No, in fact, I'd say you guys were an integral part of our success.
Well, great. Well, that's very nice.
I'm sure you remember that concert well, Chuck, right?
Yeah.
Michigan, absolutely. That big concert hall, that's a 35, it's the biggest concert hall in North America.
Yeah, Hill. Yeah.
The only bigger one is the West Point, but that's not a concert hall. That was made for the 5,000 students at West Point.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not really the concert hall, but the concert hall at Michigan is absolutely outstanding.
Yeah.
And Freddie Mills, our trumpet player, played his last concert with us at the University of Michigan.
Oh, no kidding.
Cool.
That was 1996.
Yeah, the acoustical profile of that concert hall was really interesting because it's amazing for tuba, but I know a lot of different instruments complain about it because the ceiling is obviously not flat; it sort of rises. So depending on where you are and where you're pointed, they did the concerto competition in Hill Auditorium.
Awesome.
And it was really cool to like stand on that huge stage by yourself with like a bunch of faculty members in the audience, and it really felt like there was something bigger than you out there. Like you were
There's a tremendous connection between Ann Arbor and Canada. Many people become faculty at Ann Arbor. There's a cross. Somehow there's a sympathy. The style, the feeling in Ann Arbor is very similar to being in Toronto, for example. It has that same community feeling. So it's been a real strong influence for a lot of Canadians, which is kind of interesting. And you guys represent that big time for tubas.
And it's so close, right? I remember when I was at Western. It was I think 2 hours away or something.
Right.
Ish hours. Anyway, so that was closer than Toronto.
Mm-hmm.
So you could go there and see a concert if you didn't want to, but you can't do that now. But you could do that before.
Well, you can go. It's just coming back is a problem.
Yeah, exactly.
I was just going to say that John Griffiths went to Michigan.
As well.
When Torchinski taught there, and so John was all gung ho about Michigan and Ann Arbor being the place, and it's a great place.
Nice. Yeah. I remember Judy Lohman, the harpist, was constantly on the road back and forth. She was teaching harp down there.
Wow.
And lots of interaction between the two. Tom, this has really been great to meet up with you in this forum.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Yes, really my pleasure. Yeah.
Looking forward to getting out there to Calgary one day and actually playing with you guys.
Yeah, we need to have you guys out here very soon.
It's been a couple of years, so yeah.
Awesome.
So.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Tom. It's always great to chat and hang out.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you, guys.
All right.
Keep at it.
Ciao.
Bye for now.